Hi folks, in this video I will show you how to create an interactive report in a Word document that includes two Excel pivot tables. These are connected to an Excel workbook, this workbook right here. So when the data in the workbook gets updated, these tables here in the Word document will automatically get updated. And then we also have two pivot charts that are also from this Excel workbook. So these charts will also automatically get updated when the data in the Excel workbook gets updated. So let me demonstrate this for you. So I have a slicer here that is connected to these pivot tables. And so when I click, say I select different years here. So instead of all years, let's say I select 13, 14, 15, and 16. So when I select this, as you can see, the tables got updated and these tables also got updated. And you can see now you're only seeing 13, 14, 15, and 16 here in both of these charts. And so let me just show you this again, how it actually works. If I select different years, you can see everything is getting automatically updated. So this is what we're going to create in this video from scratch. There are two pivot tables and two pivot charts that we will include in the Word document. And those tables and charts are already created and set up here in this tab of the Excel workbook. Now I'm assuming that you know how to create pivot tables and pivot charts, but I've included links below to my videos where I've shown steps on how to create tables and charts from scratch in Excel, so be sure to check that out if you would like a reminder on this. The dataset that was used to create these tables and charts is sales data for a company that sells different types of items online and offline all across the world. So let's start by first making some basic modifications to the Word document before we add the tables and the charts to it. So for that, let's go to the Word document here. And the first step that I will do is change the layout of this report. So for that, I will go to Layout, and then let's change the orientation from portrait to landscape right now. All right. Now, next, let's go to the size option here. And from letter, we will instead use legal size. So this is slightly longer page. And then the last setup that I would like to do is to change the background color. So we will give it some color. And for that, I will go to Design. And under Design, I will go to Page Color. And let's make this page color blue, so dark blue. And lastly, I will change the margins on this page. So for that, I will go back to Layout and then Margins. And let's change it to narrow. Now, these steps that I just performed, you don't have to perform them. This is custom to what I am trying to create. So if your report is in a different format, that is totally okay. You can just simply skip all of these steps here. Let's now add a title to this report, and I will add this title to the header section of this page. To access the header section, I can simply just double click on the top side of the page, and this will open up the header section here. Now I will go to Insert, Text Box, and I will create a simple text box. And then you can drag it to the header section and resize it to your liking. And I will delete this text and I will call this Sales Report. And now you can modify this, the font of this title here. So let's just make it bold and let's increase the size. Maybe we can do size of 20. And let's put the title in the center here. Okay, so now we have just added the title for this report. All right, let's now discuss how the layout of this report will look like. For this report, my plan is to have two Excel pivot tables included on the left side of the report and two pivot charts included on the right side of the report. So there will be two sections for it. A left section that contains the table, a right section that contains the pivot charts from our Excel workbook. Let's copy the first pivot table in this report. To do that, I will go to Insert, and we will first include a text box. And a simple text box is good. Let's move this to the top left corner, and let's get rid of this text, and let's resize it. And the idea here is that we will copy and paste the table inside of this text box. Now let's go to Excel workbook. Before I copy this table here, I will first copy the title of this table, and the title is Average Profit by Region and Sales Channel. So let's highlight this, right click, copy, and then let's go here, right click inside of the text box, and we will click on this option here, paste option, keep text only. And this will paste the title here in this text box. Let's highlight this. Let's go to home and let's center it, and let's make it bold, and let's change the font size to 12. All right. Now this is where we want our table to be pasted. So let's go back to the workbook, and let's now highlight this table here. So this is the pivot table we want to copy and paste, and these are the rows and columns we would like to be shown in the report. So after highlighting it, right click, copy. Let's go back to the report. Inside of the text box, right click, and then we would like to paste here, but it's very important to paste it using the right options here. And the option to use is link and use destination styles. Now we want to link it because it needs to be linked to the workbook. So if there are changes in the workbook, they will be automatically updated here. But we also want to use destination style, because otherwise if we use the source style, which is the other option here, this will be challenging because every time the source formatting changes, it will mess up the look and feel of this report. So we would like to use this option, link and use destination style. So click this, and now our table is pasted inside of this text box. And the next step is to make modifications and customize this table. Let's first decrease the size of the font here, and let's decrease it down to 10. Let's make this first column, so select the first column and then let's align it to the left. Select these three columns and let's align everything to the right. And so the table is pretty much formatted here. Now let's give this table a theme. So we'll give it a style. And for that, let's double click on this top left corner. And when you double click, this will open up some table styles that you can apply to this table. And so let's apply a style, maybe something like that. And the last thing I would do is let's not make these values here. Let's not make it bold. All right, and this should be it. So now what we can do is we can resize the text box. But before we resize the text box, let's just adjust the column width here. So let's move this to the left. Let's make the width slightly smaller. All right, that's good enough. And now let's resize the text box. Okay. All right, so this looks good. And let's save our changes. And now what you'll notice is if you right click on any of these cells, you will see that there's an option here called update link. And this tells you that this is actually linked to this workbook here. So when you click it, it will update the values if the workbook contains different values. So this is done. What we want to do next is we want the second table to be included here. So let's add the second pivot table to the lower left side of this report. Now, before I do that, I want to make a couple of more quick edits to this table here. The first edit I want to make is to adjust the height of each row. So right now, as you can see, the height is slightly bigger than what we need. So let's select this table, right click, go to table properties, and then under row, let's select the height to be say 0.20, and row height should be exactly, and say okay. And so now this table, the height of each row has been adjusted, and now we can readjust the size of this text box. All right, and the second edit I want to make is I want to remove this new line here so the table gets pushed up. So let's delete this line so the table moves up, and maybe instead of moving this up, maybe I'll move the top side down slightly. All right, so this table is done. Now we're ready to add the second table. So we will repeat the steps again. We will go to insert, text box. Let's move this text box here. Let's delete the text in it. Let's go to the workbook. This is the table we want to copy now. So let's first select the title here, right click, copy, and let's right click here, paste options, keep text only. This will paste the title here. Let's go to home, make it bold, set it to 12 and center. All right, and now let's go back and let's select the table that we want to copy. So select the table, right click, copy, and then here we will paste it here. So right click, and again we want to link and use destination style. All right, let's delete this line here, and all right, now again what we want to do is let's adjust the height of each row. So I can click here on the top left corner of the table, right click there, click on table properties, and again let's set it to 0.20 and exact. All right, and now I can adjust the height of this. All right, now let's set the font size here. So select these rows and let's set the font size to 10, and let's not make it bold. So let's make the values, leave the header here bolded. The values are plain format, and then let's select this column, align it to the left, select these columns, align it to the right, and let's now adjust the width of these columns. So maybe we can have it the same as the first table here, so everything lines up. All right, and then let's now adjust the text box. All right, now next what we want to do is apply the table style to it. So again, I will double click here. This will open up table styles, and let's select the same table style, same as above. And we have just added the second table to the report. So we're done adding the pivot tables. Both of these pivot tables are added, and they're both connected to the Excel workbook. Let's test and see if we change data in the pivot table, we should notice that this data is changing as well. So let me rearrange these windows so we can see the updates. All right, so let's now go scroll up and let's select different years here on the slicer. So let's select say 2010 and 2011 and 12 and 13, and let's select it. So you can see that the data is changing. If the data is not changing in this table, you can right click and update the link, and this will update the data. Let's select some other years. And you can see that the values are updating. The steps to add pivot charts to this report are the same as adding pivot tables. First, we will add a text box to it. And let's adjust the height and width for this. And let's delete the text. So this is where we will add our pivot chart. So first we want to add the title for the pivot chart. So let's go to the Excel workbook. And if you scroll down, you will see that there's this chart. This is the chart that we want to add. Now this chart is for average profit by year and region. So years are in the x-axis, and then the different regions are here. They're grouped and color coded. So this pivot chart is connected to this pivot table, and this pivot table is controlled by this slicer. So when I change years in this slicer, the pivot table gets updated, and then the pivot chart also gets updated. So before I add the chart, let's copy the title, and let's go back to the report here, and let's right click and paste. So this adds the title, and let's center it, make it bold, and let's set the size to 12. All right, now this is where I want to add this pivot chart. So let's go back to the workbook, select the chart, right click, copy, and let's right click here. And again, I want to link, and I want to use destination theme. Okay, so let's copy paste here. All right, so the chart is now in this report. Now using the same steps, I will add a second chart to the lower right corner. So let's insert the text box, place it here, adjust the height and width for it, delete the text. Let's go back to the workbook. If you scroll down, there is another chart here, and this chart is for units sold and average profit by year. So years again are in the x-axis. The bars are the sum of units sold, so total units sold. And then this line chart is showing average profit. All right, so what I want to do first is copy and paste the title. Let's center this, make it bold, and let's add the chart here. So select the chart, right click, copy, and here, right click, and again we want to use destination theme and link data. All right, we may need to adjust the height for this text box here. All right, so this is done. So we now have two charts, and we also have two pivot tables. All of these are connected to this Excel workbook. So let's now see how all of this works. And before we do that, let's make sure we save this file, and we also save the table. So now let's test how when I change the years in the slicer, all of this data here will be updated. So let's go to the workbook, and instead of having all these years, let's select 2010, 11, 12, and just 13. Okay, so we can see all of these pivot tables are getting updated. And if we go here, you can see that The pivot chart now shows 4 years, and this chart is also updated. And these two tables, we can verify that they have been updated by comparing them to these values. So everything here is working perfectly as expected. A common question that I get is what happens when you close this Word file? So let's test that now. So if I close this Word file and I change the years in the slicer, so let's say I select all of these years. So now the data is updated and I save this workbook. So now when I go back to the Word file and I open it, this will ask me, this document contains link that may refer to other files. Do you want to update this document with the data from the linked files? And we want to say yes to it because the data in the linked file was updated. I changed the years in the slicer. The tables get updated. To update the pivot charts, I will right click here and click on edit data. And this will update the pivot chart. And do the same here, edit data, and this will update the pivot chart. So you don't have to keep copying and pasting pivot charts here in this report. Everything is getting updated automatically.